This case has taken a significant legal turn, and the latest courtroom developments could have serious implications if proven. Prosecutors have now introduced new claims that go beyond the initial charges, including allegations that the victim, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, was pregnant at some point during her relationship with David. If substantiated, this detail could play a critical role in establishing motive, intent, and the nature of the relationship in court. However, as with all developments in an active criminal case, these claims remain allegations unless and until they are proven through admissible evidence. According to statements presented during a recent court hearing, David is currently being held in custody in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste. Prosecutors outlined a timeline of events and introduced details about their relationship, including allegations that it began when Celeste was as young as 11 years old and later progressed into what they describe as an inappropriate relationship when she was still a minor. From a legal standpoint, these allegations fall under serious criminal statutes involving minors, where the prosecution must prove not only that the victim was underage, but also that the accused knowingly engaged in unlawful conduct. Establishing knowledge and intent is critical in cases like this. One of the most significant elements introduced by prosecutors is the claim that Celeste was pregnant during the course of this relationship. They referenced digital communications, including messages that allegedly mention pregnancy, medical decisions, and related topics. If these communications are authenticated and admitted into evidence, they could serve as powerful corroboration of the prosecution's claims. However, digital evidence must meet strict legal standards. It must be verified as authentic, properly obtained through lawful means, and clearly linked to the individuals involved. The defense may challenge these points, arguing issues such as misinterpretation, lack of context, or improper handling of evidence. Prosecutors also presented a detailed account of the events leading up to Celeste's death. According to their argument, there were escalating conflicts between the two, including claims that Celeste had threatened to reveal information that could harm David's career. In criminal law, establishing motive is not required for a conviction, but it can strengthen the prosecution's narrative by providing a reason why the alleged crime may have occurred. If the prosecution can demonstrate that there was a credible threat to the defendant's reputation or career, they may argue that this contributed to premeditation. Premeditation is a key legal concept here. For more serious charges, such as first-degree murder, prosecutors must prove that the act was planned or carried out with deliberate intent rather than being spontaneous. In this case, prosecutors are pointing to actions such as arranging transportation for the victim, sending messages after her arrival, and subsequent behavior as evidence of planning. They allege that David sent messages to Celeste after she had already arrived, possibly to create an appearance that she had not shown up. If proven, this could be interpreted as an attempt to establish an alibi, which may support claims of premeditation. Another major component of the prosecution's case involves the handling of the victim's body. Prosecutors allege that after the incident, David took steps to conceal or destroy evidence, including purchasing tools and materials in the days following the alleged crime. These claims include the purchase of items such as a shovel, chainsaws, and other materials, as well as the use of an inflatable pool in a garage. From a legal perspective, actions taken after a crime, often referred to as consciousness of guilt, can be used by prosecutors to argue that the defendant was aware of wrongdoing and attempted to avoid detection. However, these claims must be supported by clear evidence, such as purchase records, surveillance footage, or forensic findings. Forensic evidence appears to be a central part of this case. Prosecutors referenced DNA evidence, physical findings at the property, and materials allegedly linked to the items purchased. In court, forensic evidence must be handled according to strict chain of custody procedures to ensure it has not been contaminated or altered. The defense may challenge the reliability or interpretation of such evidence, potentially introducing alternative explanations or questioning whether it definitively links the accused to the alleged acts. Another key point raised by prosecutors is that David was allegedly the last person seen driving the vehicle in which Celeste's remains were later discovered. Surveillance footage and other forms of evidence are said to support this claim. If verified, this could be a significant factor in establishing a timeline and connecting the defendant to the disposal of the body. However, the defense may argue that such evidence does not conclusively prove responsibility for the crime itself and may attempt to introduce alternative interpretations. The case also raises questions about potential third-party involvement. There are suggestions, though not confirmed in court, that others may have been aware of or indirectly involved in certain events. Legally, this would fall under concepts such as aiding and abetting, which require proof that another individual knowingly assisted in the commission of a crime. Without clear evidence of knowledge and intent, such claims would be difficult to sustain in court. At this stage, these remain speculative and would require substantial proof to become legally relevant. From the defense perspective, several strategies may be employed. The defense could challenge the prosecution's timeline, question the credibility of digital and forensic evidence, and argue that the narrative presented relies on assumptions rather than definitive proof. They may also emphasize the legal principle that the burden of proof lies entirely with the prosecution. In criminal law, the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This means that if the defense can introduce any reasonable alternative explanation for the evidence, the jury must acquit. Possible legal outcomes in this case vary depending on how the evidence develops. If the prosecution successfully proves its case beyond a reasonable doubt, the result could be a conviction on serious criminal charges, potentially carrying significant penalties. If the evidence is found to be insufficient or unreliable, some or all charges could be dismissed. There is also the possibility of additional charges being filed if further evidence emerges, particularly if claims regarding pregnancy or multiple offenses are substantiated. In some cases, defendants may enter plea agreements, which can resolve a case without a full trial, though this depends on negotiations between the defense and prosecution. It is also important to distinguish between criminal proceedings and public reaction. While the case has generated strong emotional responses and widespread attention, legal outcomes are determined solely by evidence presented in court. Statements made online, speculation, or public opinion do not carry legal weight unless they are supported by admissible proof. This distinction is essential in maintaining the integrity of the legal process. At this stage, the case remains ongoing, and many of the claims presented by prosecutors have not yet been tested through cross-examination or judicial review. As more evidence is introduced and both sides present their arguments, the court will evaluate the credibility and sufficiency of that evidence. Until that process is complete, all allegations must be understood as part of an active legal proceeding rather than established fact. Ultimately, this case highlights the complexity of the legal system, particularly in situations involving serious allegations and multiple layers of evidence. The outcome will depend not on how disturbing the claims may be, but on whether they can be proven according to the strict standards required by law. As developments continue, the focus will remain on what can be substantiated in court and whether the prosecution can meet its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt.